Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 193 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron. So pleased that you're here with me today. Today, I am talking to Vikram Chandra about what sounds to be a very, very cool new app/product that you can use to write in and keep your writing organized. Besides that, he is a very esteemed writer, and it was just really fun to talk to him. So I know you're going to enjoy the interview as that's coming up. What else is going on around here? Well, I am having an incredibly creative week. I am, in between projects right now. I'm balancing some projects that I want to be working on. I'm waiting for my editor to go over my new edits on Hush Little Baby, and I've already figured out a couple things that I really screwed up, or not really screwed up, but I could do better. So I'm hoping that I get another round that I can make some, not big shifts, but, not small shifts to the book. So I've already been communicating with her about that, and that is fun. But what that means is in this in-between time is kind of this fertile ground for me to be thinking about what I want to do next. And I was talking to my friend Jay Thorne over at The Writer's Well, which is a podcast we do. And after our podcast chat, we were talking about other things. And he recommended this book to me called E-Myth. E-Myth. And I can't remember who the author is. It came out like literally 30 or 40 years ago. I think I calculated 35 years ago. So there's some outdated stuff in there. But it was so useful to me to think about basically who I want to be as a writer, who I want my business to be, what I want my business to be, and what I want to provide my customers. Because our readers are our customers, and they come to us because they are looking for a certain thing. My readers come to me because they are looking for a certain sense of comfort. And I know I've said that on the show before. Even when I'm writing the scariest book I can possibly write, readers say, oh, but it's so heartwarming, which is not what I'm going for, but I can't help but doing that. That is my writing voice. That happens to be my personality too. Because I do believe in people. I really, truly believe in the best in people, and I know how to bring that out. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of playing with this book that I've been calling Replenish for a while. It's a collection of Patreon essays that I've been shaping into an actual memoir, somewhat about burnout, somewhat about recovery from addiction. But I'm shifting the lens on it a little bit. I'm shifting the lens so that it is focused on the reader and less on myself, if that makes sense. I teach memoir, I love memoir, I write memoir, and I read memoir/self-help. And when I'm reading memoir/self-help, I really love the memoir parts of it, so I'm not going to strip those out. But a large part of me and my heart are now drawn more to pushing out, to helping lift up, if that makes any sense. I'm pretty excited about it. Like, I'm kind of giddy about it. I changed the title of the book, which I'm not going to tell you yet because I'm going to reveal all soon. But I think I might be starting a new podcast. I don't know. I'll keep you posted on that too. But it feels like a really exciting time right now. Absolutely nothing will change. I'll still be teaching, and I'll still be writing the fiction that I love to write. But in terms of my memoir nonfiction, I want it to be more helpful than it has been in the past, without being a how-to. I know that I'm not saying very much by this, but rest assured that I'm overflowing with excitement about this. So yeah, it's going to be great. That's what I'm doing right now. What else am I doing? I feel like I wanted to tell you about something and now I can't remember it, but I will tell you about two new patrons. Lisa Fabish, thank you so much. I got to work with Lisa on her query letter, and it is rad. It's going to be a great book. And Anita Ramirez edited her pledge up so that she's now at the level where she can use me as a mini coach, and I will answer her questions on the air. I do have a collection of some questions, and I will try to put together that mini episode sometime in the next week. So I was going to ask if you would go over to iTunes or whatever platform it is that you listen to the show on and give it a rating. I never ask for that. I never remember to, but it's kind of important for visibility, and I want to share with you a couple of the most recent reviews, and maybe I will continue to do this. So if you leave a review, I might read it out loud. So this one is from Anthony C. Moore, and he says, "Hi, Rachel. Great show. I'm a nonfiction writer, and I really like your take on telling stories and how it applies to actual real-world writing. I love knowing that nonfiction writers are also listening to the show because I think we talk about fiction a lot. But nonfiction is also so fun to write and requires just as much thought. So thank you for that, Anthony. And this one, really, I never look at my reviews ever on pretty much anything. And I just randomly looked at reviews yesterday to see if I should ask people for more of them, and I should. But this one really struck my heart. So this one is from Anton H. Gill, and he says, "I've just listened to my very first episode, and I have to say that even though you didn't have to, even though I wasn't looking for it, and even though others might say you have no business doing this on a writing podcast, I thought that it was brave and progressive of you to touch on the current BLM movement, and more importantly, the role that the Caucasian community needs to play in reforming their mindset. You have a voice, and you used it in a very small way to gently encourage others to self-reflect and change. Bravo." Anton, thank you. That really blew my mind and made me feel good, and also made me feel ashamed that we as a country are like this and have to be talking about this. But the fact that you left a review like that, I really appreciate it. So all y'all, go over to where you listen to podcasts if you've been listening to me for a show or for a while, and if you don't mind leaving a review, I'll probably be looking for them on iTunes because I know where to look there. But if you put one somewhere else, go ahead and send it to me. And yeah, I really appreciate it. So that's that. I will let you get into the interview now with Vikram. You're going to enjoy it. He is a charmer, and he absolutely knows of what he speaks. So enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, well, I could not be more pleased today to be talking to Vikram Chandra. Hello, Vikram.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. I've had your beautiful wife, Melanie Abrams, on this show, and that was such a treat. And I'm so happy that you reached out and we're going to do this today. Let me give a little intro to you because you are an impressive writer. And this is great. Vikram Chandra's latest book is Geek Sublime, The Beauty of Code, The Code of Beauty. He has also written the novels Sacred Games and Red Earth and Pouring Rain, and the short story collection Love and Longing in Bombay. In July 2018, Netflix released a series based on Sacred Games. In 2019, this series was included in the New York Times list of the 30 best international TV shows of the decade. His honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Commonwealth Writers Prize, the Crossword Prize, and the Salon Book Award. He teaches creative writing at the University of California, Berkeley, and his work has been translated into 19 languages. He's a co-founder of Granthika, a software startup that is building a next-generation tool for fiction writers. Did I say Granthika right?
Granthika, yeah.
Granthika.
Right.
Okay, so you do have the TH in there. I was wondering about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about that because I'm excited about that. But also, if anybody's watching on the video, you are surrounded by books. I'm assuming this is your home office.
Indeed.
You get so much done, and this show is primarily about writing process of working writers. And I would love to talk to you about how you do this, how you get this done with a family, and perhaps how that might have changed a little bit during these unprecedented times.
Yeah. So, I follow this discipline that I think is common among writers. I try and write at regular hours of the day as much as I can. So you have to treat it like going to an office, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Picasso who said inspiration exists, but she has to find you working.
Yes. I love that one.
Right.
And she gets used to finding you in your chair at a certain hour. Yeah.
Exactly. And I should say though that, since we've had kids, and then especially since the pandemic when they're home all day,
Yeah.
you have to find these fragments of time. At least that's what I've been doing. And I've surprised myself by actually being able to do it that way. It's so not me. And then the other thing is that I do that thing where I set myself a daily word target.
Mm-hmm.
So I do 400 words. And if I reach that, even if it's like within half an hour, I just knock off, and the rest of the day feels like a holiday.
Because
And
you won. You got it done.
I got it done. Yeah, and so I mean, incredibly enough, after years and years, you finally end up with a finished manuscript, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's basically it. And yeah, and as you see, I do lots and lots of research, and there's piles of books behind me and papers and scan things in my laptop. And that's, I mean, incredible. Oops, sorry. So
No worries.
sorry.
Life
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Um, uh, and that's incredibly valuable. Although I do end up going down these rabbit holes all the time, which might not end up in the books, but I want to believe, and I really think they do, they form this understructure,
Yeah.
right? That's very rich, and out of which I get unexpected surprises, right? I mean, just this morning, I was doing some research about, I have a character who's supposed to be born in a tiny village of India, and I was trying to figure out where he was going to be, and I was looking at a map of that area, and I found a forest, and like the whole morning I spent on researching this forest. But it's going to be so cool because I can put lots of things that are relevant to what I'm writing emerging from that forest.
Isn't that interesting too, to think about research as that iceberg where, the tip of it is what turns into the book,
Yeah.
but the knowledge base that supports it is so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you manage the writing with Melanie? Like how do you, especially with the kids at home in this time? I'm just curious as how two writers living together work.
Well, before all this happened, we had pretty regular hours because both of us teach at Berkeley,
Yeah.
teach fiction. And so we make sure that we're teaching on alternate days, right? And so we have a common office in the department as well, so we don't want to get on each other's nerves there.
Perfect.
So we could alternate it, and then for the weekends we could coordinate it. But really now the situation's driven us both into a complete mess, and the kids. It's really hard on the kids, right?
Yeah.
So again, we try as best we can is to stagger it, right? So like you're going to take care of them from time X. But I have to say, as always, so much more of the burden falls on the women, right? The mothers always like get it because the girls they need her. I don't know if they need her, but they want to express
That's what they
themselves.
want.
Yeah, different way than they can to me.
And they're little, right?
They're 10 and 12, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's,
I mean, those are essential years where you really need that support, right?
Exactly. That's so interesting. But I do love how you say that you're surprising yourself by getting the work done. And the surprising thing for me is that in this podcast, I keep talking to writers who are saying the same thing. Like, I thought this would derail me, and it didn't. I just wrote. I just turned in a book on Monday to my editor, and it was almost this blessing that I was working on it during the pandemic, because we can go into it and kind of disappear for a while.
Yeah. I mean,
you find that?
I do, but I don't know. I concentrate really hard, so I do get annoyed with either of the kids when they come in here and they need something during the day, because then they're like impatient. They want me to give them something immediately. No, drive, go away.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't have kids, so that at least, I've got the dogs and the cats, and they're very easy to tell to go away. Yeah. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
I think right now, it's a new area for me. So the last book was nonfiction, right, which I'd never done, and so that was completely new territory, and that was really scary. I mean, especially in terms of finding a structure, right? Because in fiction, I'm very driven by plot, right? I can figure out what the protagonist and the rest of them want, and then I can put that in action, and I discover the book through that. And this time, I had that, but I'm finding that I don't want to do plot in that conventional sense, right? And so again, it's like strange new territory for me. And I'm really anxious, and I have to say terrified of this, because then I have to give the reader something else, right? That's going to drive them forward.
And how do you balance that? How do you figure out how to do it?
Well, I'm on first draft right now, so I'm
Yeah,
trying
so
not to think about that too much.
just a
But
mess right now. Yeah.
just a mess right now.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, and the nonfiction book actually taught me something about this, because it's got, again, it doesn't have a straight chronological structure, although it's describing history a lot of various sorts. But it leaps from across centuries and from place to place. And, you can gain energy in the writing just by making one of those surprise leaps, right? And that's, no, I'm not doing quite that thing, but I'm managing to do something like it.
Yeah. I like that phrase, the surprise leaps. Those are the best parts of writing. What is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
I don't know, Melanie might have said this already when she talked to you, but our friend Robert Haas, this amazing poet, is also
Yeah.
in the department. And he said that writing is hell and not writing is hell. The only tolerable state is just having written.
Yes. It is the truest thing that has ever been said about writing.
Yeah. So like I was saying, like 400 words, I go do those, and then it's like so restful. And then the other part is that period when you've turned in a book and the publishers have okayed it, it's gone off to print, and then before it comes out, you've done all the work and there's nothing else to do, and you're just off. It's such a perfect holiday.
That is literally the best part.
Yeah.
The best. Oh, what was I going to say about I just had a tangent in my brain as I was following you. Can you share a craft tip of any sort for us?
Well, I mean, there's this exercise, I guess you'd call it, that I do every semester, whether I'm teaching freshmen or grad students. And I call it 12 questions in search of a character.
Ooh.
Right? So you start with, give your character a name, and then, things like, tell us something odd or specific about their body. Who broke their heart when they were young? Who is a famous person they hate and why? And then finally, at the end,
I like that one.
Yeah. And then two crucial questions. What do they want, really desire at this point in their life? And then what's preventing them from getting it, right? And again, then you've got desire, obstacle, right? And then you can figure out like what will grow from that, right? And there's that old formula, desire plus danger equals drama, right?
I have actually never heard that. I don't think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's
it's great. So that's usually where it starts for me, right? So my last fiction book is this enormous 900-page monster about policing and organized crime and international sort of spy intrigue in India. And when I started that, I knew nothing, right? I had this policeman. I'd written in that book of short stories, I had my take on the police procedural, right? Your basic story with a dead body at the beginning.
Yeah.
And by the end, why the murder was committed. But this time, the same cop is outside a strange bunker-like building in Bombay, and he's talking to a gangster who's barricaded himself inside, a very famous gangster. And the guy's talking to him over a speaker. And I had no idea what the guy was going to say to him. I had no idea who this gangster was, like what he wanted, where he came from. And then by asking questions like this, I start to discover the history, the backstory, the texture of all the people, right? And then it kind of grows from that. So for me, at least, the story never comes externally, right? The architecture of the story is not something I think of first. Although sometimes I think people who work like that must be blessed, right? Because they can plan.
Yeah.
But I've never been able to do that. And so then I explore the character, and then I figure out things, and then I can only discover through writing, right? Figure out the story is. And then what that also means is that the first and the 19th draft are completely messy, and they make no sense. So Melanie and I, when we met, I was like halfway through Sacred Games, the big cop book, the big crime book. And my friends used to ask, like, how's the book going? Where are you? And I would always say in the middle. And this went on for years and years. And then one day, I, I like I typed the last sentence, and I knew that was the last sentence. And
Ooh.
Melanie was sleeping in the bedroom, and I went and like tugged her toe, and she opened her eyes and said, "What?" And I said, "Well, I finished." And she said, "Finished what?"
You're like, only the most important thing.
Right. And then she said, "Can I read it?" And I said, "No, sorry, you can't, like, because it's full of holes and like backtrack and little notes to myself, fix this. It won't make sense." And I think she wanted to throw something at me. And so then I spent the next 4 months like doing the second draft, right? And in which I filled in all that stuff, cut out huge chunks. And it's a grind, it's debilitating. And you lose faith in the middle, and then you have to work yourself back up, and finally it gets done. So yeah, sorry, that was a big long tangent from craft question. I should say though that this is going to sound like self-promotion, but so the software that I've been working on is called Granthika. So if you go to blog.granthika.co, I've written a bunch of, I guess you'd call them essays, a few essays about writing, right? And one of them is called Finding a Character, on how you figure out characters and how things are. And I've given the entire exercise in that.
Great. Then I will link to that in the show notes for this, so people can go to howdoyourwrite.net, and I will send you over to the site. And I definitely want to talk about that program, but I do want to ask really quickly, just as kind of a curiosity thing. You do so much research for all of your books. Do you research more for fiction or nonfiction? I'm curious. I mean, it must be nonfiction, right?
No, both actually the same.
Equally?
Yeah, because, so for instance, to use the crime book again as an example, right? Like when I started, the reason I started it was because crime in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in India, in Bombay, was astonishingly like violent, right? Sort of what I guess occurred here in the 20s, right? So there were, my father and I were driving back home one afternoon, and suddenly we hear automatic weapons gunfire, right, echoing off the buildings. And so my question was, why is this happening, right? What is going on? And all I knew about organized crime at that point was what I'd seen in the movies.
Sure, yeah.
So because of that cop story that I was talking about, the short story, at that time I'd met a couple of policemen, crime reporter who's become over the years one of my best friends. He's one of the people that Sacred Games is dedicated to. So I asked these people, like, can you introduce me to other people who will talk to me? And then I just, like, it spreads like a net, right? Like every person I would meet, I would say the same thing to them. And I find that really valuable because it's like a kind of anthropological field research, right? And you learn so many things by sitting in people's offices, and the stuff that you absorb, like this office tells you something about me, right? And you go to their homes, and you learn about gangster aesthetics, right? Like what an immensely rich guy like a gangster puts in his living room.
Right? I'm fascinated. Yeah.
And then at some point you can use that all in your book. And then I did a lot of reading, right? Like, and apart from like news reports, I mean, some of my friends in the field gave me like police reports. There's police journals that you can read, right? So it's incredibly enriching. And in some sense, for a nonfiction book, you can't do the same if you're writing about events way back in the past, right? I mean, except when you're writing about contemporary events, right? Because you go and talk to people who are doing tech right now, right?
Right.
But since I was writing about stuff that is happening now, I love doing that, right? And it's, like I said, it shows up in my writing, so it's a reward, right? And the most exciting thing is, like, after the book was done, I got emails from people I'd never met who said, well done, right?
Oh, yes.
Right. I mean, the best one was, like, I'd met this incredible guy, David Sullivan, and we called him Sully. He was one of North America's most famous private detectives. In the true sense, he was a PI, right? And And so when I met him, like every other writer who'd ever met him in their life, I was like, Sully, tell me your stories, man. And he was very wary of this, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so, the book came out. I went to India for a long summer, and then I get this text message which said, okay, now I know that you're not just joking, right? And that was the best compliment to get ever. A guy like Sully, who spent a lifetime doing this stuff, right, says, you got most of the ground right?
Oh, that's amazing. How do you organize your research? How do you keep it?
Oh, you can see the mess.
In piles is the answer.
Piles. Yeah, but see, this is one of the frustrations that drove me to think about making software for writers, right? So so what used to happen, and Sacred Games was my third book, right? And so by that time I knew how awful and exhausting it was to manage information, right? So you gather all these books, you take notes, you make timelines on the wall or using software, but the problem is that it's all scattered about and there's no connection to your text, right, to your manuscript. Mm-hmm. So when you reach page 300 and you suddenly remember, okay, so and so told me such thing in 2015, and you want to look that up, you go to your note-taking program, and then finding that stuff among 3,000 other notes becomes a problem in itself, right?
Yeah. So tell us how Granthika addresses that.
Sure. So what it is, it's like the child of a weird marriage between a text editor, a database, and a timeline, right?
Oh,
and
interesting.
So what that means is that as you write, you create, I guess, what you could think of as pages or cards for characters, for locations, for objects, and for events, right? And then those are very tightly integrated into the manuscript, right? So it's like sort of doing writing on Facebook. You do those mentions, right? You do the @ sign.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so the text has connections built in, right? So I was writing this morning and I did it. So if I reach, I'm referring to a character named Abba, somebody's father, and I want to know something about him, with one click, I can jump to his card. And then with one click, I jump right back.
That's cool.
Right. And so then, the other thing is that timelines, for me at least, are one of the most difficult things to keep track of, right? Especially because I write narratives that are set against actual history, right? Mm-hmm. So if you mess up, right, there were these bomb blasts in Bombay and my character was 32 at the time, and then you imply in some other way that he became a cop when he was 9 years old, right? That's a problem. People are going to get, readers write emails to you about that kind of thing.
They keep track of that stuff in their head.
Yeah. And it's difficult because also you have to keep so much in your head, right? And you spend it feels to me like manual in a ledger with a quill pen, you're doing double entry bookkeeping, right?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Right. So what we've done is, so we've built this kind of technology in a sense from the ground up to be able to do this, and it provides lots of other useful things, right? So you can ask the program, give me all the chapters in which Holmes and Watson appear together.
Wow.
Right? And it'll show you that. Because the mentions are done, when you look at a character, you can see every place in the entire manuscript where that character has been mentioned, right? And again, jump with one click, to whatever place in the manuscript you want to look at.
It's a lot better than the whole find the word Bill,
Bill,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, especially when Bill will show up as a bird's beak too,
yes, exactly.
as an invoice, right? Right.
Yes.
So there's that. The event, the timeline and events are one of the things that are intelligent, right? In that if you say the inquest must come after the murder, right? It'll figure out that the inquest must also come after the inciting event for the murder.
Wow, that's smart.
Yeah, and then, like I was saying, it's flexible technology underneath. So in the near future, we can, and we hope to add things like, it can reason over all of this, right? So if you say John marries Kamna, it'll know that Ajit has now become Kamna's, John's brother-in-law, right? Stuff like that. There's that. What
Wow.
else? There's so also to get a little tech nerdy. The reason we were able to do this is because underneath there is a knowledge graph, and the text is part of a knowledge graph. And what a knowledge graph means is like if you imagine a whole network of facts essentially that are connected to each other, right? So knowledge operates like that in the real world, right? You know, I'm so and so's child, and my
Mm-hmm.
child is their granddaughter, right? So what this means is that we can um, integrate outside knowledge into this knowledge graph, right? So if there's something in Wikipedia which refers to which is useful to you, we can reach out and get it, right? And sort of show
Oh
you
my goodness.
possibly this might be connected. Uh, Metrics, right? So what I mean by that is this, sentence length and that kind of thing is usually what is given to you. But we're working with one of the world's leading experts on text analysis. He's called Andrew Piper at McGill University up in Canada. And he's helping us put in things like, how many women versus men are there in your manuscript, right? So if you analyze Hound of the Baskervilles, you see that the Holmesian universe is very male.
Yeah, yeah.
And then for gender conformity, right? Like for our words like beautiful attached to women much more than they are to
Yeah.
men, which is so annoying, right? Like, and I realize that as I'm saying all this, I'm making it sound like you need to have a degree in rocket science, right?
Well, and that was my next question. How difficult is this? Because this does sound hard. I could barely work Scrivener.
No, because we've worked really, really hard right from the beginning to make it not difficult to use, right? So we had a bunch of writers come on board early, and we call them our advisors. And we ask them questions, right? Like, what do you think will be useful? So there's a big effort to make the UI, the user-facing interface, really sort of, I wouldn't call it simple, but like simple to parse, right? You know what's going on. And as far as we know, our youngest user now is 7 years old, and and she's happily making her stories in it. Oh, which reminds me, mentioning her reminded me, one of the things she wants to do is to share her stories, right? And so what we've got, which I don't think anybody else has, at least at the current time. So when you're writing your story, you're building a world, right? You're creating an entire universe. So what we can do right now is you export that universe, right? Meaning all your characters and events and so forth, and you give it to somebody else, and they can import that universe and start working in the same space.
Wow. Yeah.
Using your characters, right? And then in the near future, again, we're going to build a web version, which means everything will be connected. So then you'll be able to collaborate on your universe with other people across the world, right?
People will love that.
Yeah.
Writers will really love that.
Yeah. So it's a very ambitious project, right?
It sounds huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, and I've been obsessing about this for 25 years since I've started Sacred Games, and to see it actually come into being, right? Because like I'm a programmer, but I'm like my level of programming is very mid-range. And my co-founder, Boris Yerdanov, is like mad tech genius, right? So I think because of him, we've been able to make this thing, right? And so it's early days, but it's great fun and exciting.
And just to clarify, so is it on the market now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it is also a place where you're writing in it. This is where you, and then is there just like a functionality to export it to Word so you can send it to your editor?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can export to Word, Scrivener, PDF, and you can import in the opposite direction, right? From Word and Scrivener. And
wow. Wow.
Yeah. So it's early days. I should say also, I don't know, this is going to sound like a pathetic product plug, but one thing we do need help with, two things. One is that we need writers to give us feedback, right? So we don't end up sticking in things that aren't useful to working writers, right?
Yeah.
So we'd love for people to try it out, right? And there's a free trial, of course, on the website. And then anybody who's a student or an educator, you get a free subscription, right?
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that, okay, so Boris, we have a team of very talented programmers working with Boris, and we have one other person who has a PhD in software requirements engineering, and then there's me, a writer. And we don't have the resources to hire a growth hacking expert or a marketing person. So essentially, our marketing is crap. Right? so, so,
So
so
it
we
really has to
really,
be word of mouth at this point.
yeah, exactly. And we really need help in doing that. So, if you guys, all your viewers and listeners, like I was saying, try it out. And,
Yeah.
if you think it's useful to you, tell other people.
And if you think it's not useful in any way, like with the parts that don't work,
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah. I mean, critiques of that
yeah.
sort, just like they're in writing, are really, really useful.
Okay, right? And it's Granthika with the TH in the middle and a K, the KA.
Yeah,
So GRANTHIKA
.co.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, I would really encourage all the listeners to go try that. I know I am going to try it because I am starting a new book soon.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm going to need a new place to hold it and to work in it. And I would love to try this kind of. I see it almost like this cobweb underneath it of holding everything up.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. So what are you working on now?
Oh, it's new. Oh, actually, I should say it's not new fiction. It was fiction I was working on before we started this whole startup thing in 2016. And then I have to tell you, I mean, this is a tangent again, but everything you ever hear about how hard startups are is true 10 times over.
Oh.
Right. I mean, the usual startup terrors of like not enough money, how do you hire people? It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, very pleasing in other ways, right? Like it's creative too, so it's exciting in that way. So I stopped being able to write back then, right? And then just recently, since we released our version 1 in November, I'm writing using Granthika, and what I'm working on is again an ambitious book. It's three novellas that are set in 3 different cities in 3 different centuries, right? So again, therefore the pile of books, right?
Wow.
And therefore,
but they are linked in some way.
Although I'm not quite sure how yet, right? Mm-hmm. This is part of my problem as a writer. Mm-hmm. I have these glimpses of these other cities, but I don't know how I'm going to get there, right? What roads I'm going to travel. But yeah, so I'm working on that, and it's the usual process, right? Like some mornings I wake up and I have the solution, right? And I write happily, and then other times I sit on this chair, like staring at the screen. What am I doing? Why did I ever want to do this?
Why am I putting myself through this? I don't know if you find this, but I always have the solution. The solution comes to me, and I think it's solved all my problems. And then I get to write, and I think, oh no, it solved this tiny problem. And I still don't know what I'm doing with this book. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
I guess that's my other craft tip. Now that I think about it, is don't be afraid of revision. And revision is so. I mean, in some ways, like you were saying, what is the good time in writing? Mm-hmm. To me, revision is the best time because I've done the hard work of laying the foundations. Now I'm making everything fit together and making it pretty, right?
My favorite part.
And I have filmmaker friends who say the exact same. In fact, one of them, on Sunday, we had a meeting about another project that we're trying to put together. And he said that for him, editing on the table or nowadays on the computer is the best part for him, right? Because
that must be like what people think about us as writers when they think, how can you revise a book? How do you even hold that in your head? I think of that with a filmmaker. How can they, just boggles my mind that they are creating something out of all of these pieces. And it is basically revision. I've never thought of it that way.
No, it is. And I mean, back in the day, I went to film school and I worked on film since then, but you had to work with film strips, right? And so keeping track of those was insane because you cut out like 3 frames, right? And then you stuck that up on the wall with a piece of tape. And if you were very careful, you label that, right? But then 4 days later, you say, oh no, that cuts too soon. And you try and find those 3 frames and it's among 1,000 other frames. So I mean, I always thought that kind of detail obsessiveness is another thing that is valuable, and talented editors have that, right? They can think in these split seconds of time, and then they know where to find the split seconds of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've worked on one of the movies with one of the most talented editors, Renu Saluja, who India's ever produced. And she said as soon as she got to electronic editing, it made her life so much easier.
I can't
Right?
even imagine the
Imagine,
difference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's even bigger than moving from typewriter and paper to a word processor.
Yes.
That's just because the cutting room floor is a phrase because it was covered with frames that didn't make it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, well, thank you for telling us about Granthika. And where can listeners find you online and everything you write?
It's just my name, vikramchandra.com.
Easy.
That's where I live.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for this chat. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I find you very inspiring. And I'm not a big researcher. I'm one of those people. I research after I've written the book, and then I correct everything I got wrong in the draft. But for some reason, just looking at your office with all the books behind you makes me want to research. So good job on that.
Well, don't let me corrupt you in that way. If you're happy, right, doing it your way. I mean, that's my students ask me all the time, right? And when you go out on book tour, people say, how do you do it? And I always try and get it. I mean, your method is your method. It comes out of your chemistry.
Yes.
Right? So read all those, how to write books, but don't listen to all of them.
Yes, and that's why I do this show, because I'm always looking for the best process to write, something that'll make writing easy. And I also know that I'm never going to find it, but what people tell me and what listeners hear, we're hearing so many different things that you'll either accept it as part of your process or reject it, and then know that about yourself. So brilliant. Well, thank you, Vikram, so much. I wish you happy writing, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, smooth road to future books.
Thank you. You too. Bye.